Sylvester Stallone was walking down the carpet at a Hollywood movie premiere in 1987, surrounded by cameras, fans, and chaos. But as he moved through the crowd, something made him stop. A little girl, silent, serious, wasn't screaming like the others. She wasn't holding a poster or asking for a photo. She just looked up at him and whispered 4 words. "Give me strength." He paused, kneeled down, and told her something that would echo in her soul for the rest of her life. "You already have it. You're stool." That moment should have ended there, but 36 years later, something happens that not only shocks Stallone, but leaves the entire world speechless. Before we continue this story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you enjoy emotional stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow at 6 p.m., we have another unforgettable story waiting for you. She was just a kid. But something in her eyes told him she was already fighting a battle far bigger than her size. It was 1987, and Hollywood Boulevard smelled of sweat, popcorn, and freshly printed movie posters. Over the Top had just premiered, and hundreds of fans gathered under the blinking lights, screaming for a glimpse of Sylvester Stallone. Most were shouting his name. A few held VHS covers, but one little girl, pressed tightly against the metal barricade, wasn't saying anything. Her name was Emily Carter. She was 4, small, pale, wearing a denim jacket 2 sizes too big and sneakers with duct tape on one side. Her hair was tied up with a faded ribbon. Her father was nowhere around. She had come with her mother, who clutched a grocery bag instead of a purse. Emily didn't shout like the others. She didn't wave. She just looked up with those steel gray eyes, serious, unwavering, and when Stallone finally walked past her, she raised her tiny hand and whispered something barely audible. "Give me strength." He stopped. Security tried to move him forward, but Stallone crouched down in front of the girl, brushing aside the flashes of cameras. "What did you say, sweetheart?" Emily looked at him, unblinking. "I need strength, like yours." For a moment, everything paused. The chaos of the red carpet faded into background noise. Stallone gently took her hand in his and smiled. "You already have it," he said. "Right here." He tapped her chest with 2 fingers. No one remembered that moment except her and him. But life remembered too. But Emily didn't grow up in a house that celebrated moments like that. Her mother worked double shifts at a dry cleaner. Her father disappeared sometime around her 6th birthday. The house smelled of cigarettes and unpaid bills. No one spoke about strength. No one believed in dreams. The only thing that filled her ears at night was the sound of creaking floorboards and old reruns of Rocky on a second-hand TV with no remote. She didn't become strong. She became silent. Therefore, she turned inward. She found comfort in resistance. Not metaphorical resistance, real, physical resistance. At 12, she started pushing her dresser across the room every morning. At 14, she was the only girl in middle school who could out-arm wrestle the football team. She didn't talk about it. She didn't flaunt it, but her grip left bruises. One night, alone in the garage, she taped an old photo to the wall, a blurry snapshot of her as a child standing next to Stallone. You could barely see his face, but her hand was in his, and she never forgot what he said. "You already have it." By 17, Emily had won her first underground arm wrestling match. No crowds, no cameras. Just folding chairs, sweaty palms, and duct-tape tables in the back of a bowling alley. She beat men twice her size and walked home with $50 in a plastic envelope. But she still felt weak where it mattered, inside. Therefore, she never told anyone, not even her mother. Strength to Emily wasn't about muscles or medals. It was about surviving a life that tried to erase you, and she was surviving. Now, decades later, the arena lights were blinding. The 2023 World Arm Wrestling Championship was at its peak. Emily Carter, now 41, stood center stage in Las Vegas, her braided hair soaked in sweat, her right hand chalked up and coiled like a spring. Tattoos covered both arms, but one stood out near her wrist. Already in you. She had never spoken about the tattoo publicly, not even in interviews. People assumed it was a mantra, a training slogan. They didn't know the truth. Across from her, a young Russian competitor, 20 years younger, heavier, taller, grinned with the confidence of someone who had never lost. The crowd roared, cameras zoomed in, but in Emily's mind, she wasn't there. She was back in 1987, small, frightened, reaching out, asking for strength. She heard his voice again. "You already have it." Earlier that week backstage, a producer had approached her with a surprise guest, someone from her past. Emily had nodded politely, uninterested. But when the figure stepped through the curtain, the air left her lungs. Sylvester Stallone. Gray-haired, weathered, but unmistakably him. He looked at her for a long moment, then smiled. "I never forgot," he said. "You were the only kid that night who didn't want a picture. You wanted strength." Tears welled up in her eyes. "And now," Stallone continued, "you're giving it to everyone else." She hadn't decided what to do yet. Win or lose, cameras or not, this match wasn't about a title anymore. It was about closing the loop. It was about handing back the strength he once gave her, or proving once and for all that it had always been hers to begin with. When Emily was 8, she made her first fist, not to punch, but to protect. A boy at school had called her trailer trash. Another stole her lunch and shoved her into the fence. But when she came home with a bloody lip, her mother didn't ask what happened. She just tossed a frozen bag of peas at her and went back to folding laundry. There were no "I'm proud of yous" in that house, only silence, chores, and disappointment. But Emily never begged for love. She learned to survive without it. Therefore, she began training in secret, not with weights, but with pain. She would hold her arms against the cold metal frame of her bed until they went numb. She would grip broom handles for hours while reciting multiplication tables. At night, she replayed Stallone's voice in her mind like a prayer. "You already have it." Her teenage years were a battlefield of rejection and adrenaline. She was too strong for the girls, too quiet for the boys. Coaches wanted her on the wrestling team, but her mother forbade it. "Girls don't get scholarships for that crap," she snapped. "Get a job." So Emily lied. She picked up a shift at a diner and spent every other night training at an abandoned rec center downtown, where the air reeked of rust and rubber. That's where she met Coach Ramirez. Ramirez wasn't impressed with her grip, he was impressed with her silence. "You don't talk much," he said. "I don't need to," she rebelled. "That's dangerous." He became her first real mentor, not soft, not warm, but steady. He taught her discipline, recovery, leverage. "You need to lose before you win," he'd say, "because that's when you learn where the brakes are." Emily hated him at first. Therefore, she'd. Years passed. Wins piled up. Underground tournaments turned into regional ones. Local gyms gave way to professional hits. She went from folding chairs to folding opponents. But something in her remained fractured. Because no matter how many trophies she lifted, she couldn't lift the weight of being forgotten by the only people she ever wanted to impress, her parents, especially her mother. Emily never invited her to a single match. But in a twist of fate, after one of her national wins aired on ESPN2, a handwritten letter showed up in her mailbox. No return address. Just shaky cursive. "You never needed my approval, but you always had my pride. I just didn't know how to show it." It wasn't signed. But she knew. She never responded. Therefore, she tattooed those words just below her ribs, where no one would see them but her. Fast forward to the present. Backstage in Vegas, Stallone sat with Emily in a quiet corner. The championship was minutes away, but this moment felt larger than the match. Stallone looked her in the eyes, now adult, but still carrying the same weight she had at 4 years old. "I don't know if you remember everything," he said, but I do. That night, you reminded me what strength really looked like. It wasn't the fans, it wasn't the cameras." He paused. "It was a little girl who asked for something she already had." Emily's voice cracked. "I didn't think you'd remember me." Stallone smiled. "I didn't remember your name, but I never forgot your eyes." Stallone reached into his wallet and pulled out a folded photo. It was the original snapshot, a blurry photo of Emily, hand in his, eyes serious. Somehow, after all these years, he had kept it, carried it. "You inspired me too," he said. Back on the arena floor, tension rose. Emily's rival, Darla Wayne, was younger, faster, and undefeated. A rising star. Cameras loved her. Sponsors followed her like shadows. But Emily didn't care about fame. She cared about weight, the kind you carry alone. As they locked hands across the table, Darla smirked. "You sure you're not too old for this?" Emily looked her dead in the eye. "I was born for this." The crowd roared. The ref counted them down. Flashback. Emily 16 in Ramirez's gym, wrists swollen and eyes burning. "You can't win with anger," Ramirez had warned. "You win with truth." Now. Their hands slammed down, muscles tensed, elbows locked. And for a second, just a second, Emily felt something shift. Pain. A snap. But she didn't stop. Therefore, she changed her strategy. She stopped fighting like someone trying to win. She started pulling like someone who had nothing left to lose. In the final seconds, as her knuckles hovered just inches from defeat, Emily whispered under her breath, "Strength is already in me." And just like that, her grip tightened, the tide turned, her elbow stabilized, her rival faltered. As the final whistle blew, the crowd erupted. But Emily didn't cheer. She turned to the judges, then to the cameras, then to the edge of the crowd, where a familiar gray-haired man was clapping slowly, tears in his eyes. Finally, she looked down at her wrist, at the words he gave her long ago, and walked away from the table before the results were even announced. Emily didn't stay to hear the official announcement. She walked off the arena floor with her heart pounding, not from adrenaline, but from... For the first time in her life, she didn't need someone else to tell her she had won. And yet backstage, as she leaned against the wall trying to calm her shaking hand, she knew something deeper had been shaken loose. Not just in her wrist, in her memory, something she hadn't allowed herself to remember in decades. Flashback, 1987. After the premiere, after Stallone whispered those words, Emily's mother had yanked her away. "You embarrassed me," she hissed, begging strangers for attention like a stray dog. Emily cried in silence the entire bus ride home. Her mother never spoke of that night again, and Emily learned to stop speaking of anything at all. But Stallone's voice had stayed with her. Therefore, she built an entire life around proving that she was more than her silence. Now, standing alone with the smell of chalk still clinging to her skin, she wondered something for the first time. What if she had misunderstood that moment? What if, all these years, she'd thought she was chasing strength, when all along she was running? Coach Ramirez found her sitting on a bench with an ice pack pressed. "You should be celebrating," he said. "You broke the undefeated girl." "She didn't break," Emily replied. "She just let go." Ramirez sat beside her. "You didn't come here for a title," he said. "So what was it?" Emily looked at him. Her voice was fragile. "Closure." He nodded slowly. "You get it?" She didn't answer. Later that night, in her hotel room, Emily stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Her face looked tired, her eyes older, but her core, her fire, was still there. She reached into her duffel bag and pulled out the old photograph again, the one from 1987, her hand in Stallone's. The moment that saved her. Or did it? She turned the photo over. A faded message was scribbled in ink she hadn't noticed before. "To Emily, You don't need to fight forever, just long enough to know you can walk away." She froze. She had always remembered the words, "you already." But not this, not this. Stallone hadn't told her to fight forever. He'd told her to fight just long enough to let go. And she had spent her entire life misinterpreting a moment of empowerment as a life sentence. That was the burden. That was the loop she had come here to close. The next morning, reporters waited outside the hotel, cameras, microphones, headlines like, "Comeback Queen Carter crushes Darla Wayne." Emily Carter, the Iron Mother of arm wrestling, Vegas victory, Carter's legendary grip ends rival streak. But she didn't care about any of them. She was already gone. Stallone found her where it all began, at a quiet diner just outside L.A., not far from the theater where they'd met nearly 4 decades earlier. He sat across from her without saying a word. She slid the photo across the table. "I never saw the back," she said. Stallone looked down and smiled. "I wrote it after you left. Sent it to your school. Never knew if it reached you." "It didn't," she whispered, "until now." The air between them was heavy but kind. "Why'd you keep the photo all these years?" she asked. Stallone shrugged. "I've met millions of fans. But you didn't want fame. You wanted truth. That stuck with me." Emily looked away. "I thought I had to become someone special to deserve what you told me that day." "You already were," he replied. Back home, weeks later, Emily unpacked her bags into a small apartment by the sea. She had no trophies on display, no medals on the wall, just a single frame, the photo. Underneath it, she placed a small handwritten card. "Strength isn't what makes you stay in the fight. It's what gives you permission to walk away." The VHS tape of Over the Top, worn, scratched, the label fading, sat on her nightstand. She hadn't watched it. That night she pressed play, and for the first time she didn't cry during the arm wrestling scene. The strongest version of herself wasn't the one who fought. It was the one who forgave the pain, forgave her mother, forgave her own misunderstanding of what strength truly meant. A letter arrives in her mailbox, no return address. Inside is a note. "Emily, I'm sorry. I never knew how to be the mother you needed, but I never stopped loving you. I hope one day you'll find your own way to let love, Mom." Beneath it, a photo Emily had never seen before, watching from the back row of her first amateur tournament, unnoticed, crying. She had been there all along. The photo of her mother haunted her, not in a painful way, but in the kind of way that rewrites everything you thought you knew. It was proof that love had been there, even if it hid in the shadows, even if it arrived too late to be spoken aloud. Emily stared at it for hours. She imagined her mother sitting quietly in the bleachers, afraid to approach, afraid to say anything, watching her daughter become something she never understood, but perhaps always hoped for. That night, Emily didn't sleep. She wrote a letter, not to be sent, just to be written. "You were there. I didn't know. I think a part of me always hoped you were. I wanted your words. But maybe you only had presents to give. Maybe that's all I needed." She folded the letter and placed it inside her old training journal, between 2 pages stained with sweat and tears from years past. It stayed there, like a quiet tombstone, a goodbye that finally felt like peace. 2 months later, Emily received an invitation. A youth arm wrestling academy in Chicago wanted her to speak. They had followed her career for years. "You're more than a champion," the email said. "You're a symbol." She almost said no. Therefore, she said yes, because symbols don't matter if they stay hidden. Meanwhile, in Youth Center Gym Chicago, dozens of kids, all ages, all shapes, some cocky, some shy, all watching her with the wide eyes of someone who just saw strength walk into the room. Emily didn't start with a speech. She walked to a table, rolled up her sleeves, chalked her right hand. "Who's first?" she asked with a grin. The room exploded. She let them line up, took on every single one, lost a few on purpose, laughed, teased, encouraged. And then in the back of the room a girl stood silently. Small, gray eyes, denim jacket 2 sizes too big. Emily froze. The resemblance was surreal. She knelt. "What's your name?" she asked. "Aria," the girl whispered. "You want to wrestle?" The girl shook her head. "I just wanted to say something." Emily nodded. "Go ahead." Aria leaned forward. "Give me strength." The entire world went quiet. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She stared at the child, her heart pounding with memory, with recognition, with everything she had carried for decades. Then she smiled. She reached out, took Aria's hand and said, "You already have it, right here." "Ah?" She tapped the girl's chest with 2 fingers. The moment repeated, but this time Emily was on the other side. The giver, not the seeker, the source, not the void. She had become the voice. She had become the strength. Later, one of the organizers approached her. "That girl, she never talks to anyone, and doesn't even speak to the other kids, but she watched every one of your matches. She said you made her believe she could be more." Emily nodded, holding back tears. "She already is." Flash forward, 3 years later, Emily sat in the stands of a small high school gym. The championship was local, modest, but her heart raced like it was Vegas. At the table stood a teenager, strong, focused, braided hair tied back, Aria. She faced a boy twice her size. The ref blew the whistle, and Aria didn't flinch. She slammed his hand down in seconds. The crowd cheered, but Aria didn't celebrate. She turned to Emily in the stands and smiled, then pointed to her wrist. A fresh tattoo. "Already in me." Emily laughed, covered her mouth. The circle was complete. What was given in 1987 had lived on, had grown, had multiplied. Strength wasn't a destination. It was a seed. As she looks at the horizon, Stallone's voice echoes in her mind. Not from memory, but from within her. "You don't need to fight forever, just long enough to know you can finally rest." She was just a kid, but something in her eyes told the world she already had it. Thanks for watching. You know, sometimes in life, it's not about how loud you shout. It's about who hears you when you whisper. That little girl in 1987, she didn't come up asking for a picture or an autograph. She just asked for strength. And the truth is, she already had it. So if you're watching this right now and you feel like you're not enough, listen to me, you are. Keep going, keep fighting. And never forget, you already got what it takes. You just gotta believe it. I'm proud of her. And I'm proud of you too. Thanks again for being here. I'll see you in the next one. All right?